There is a building material on this earth that never burns. It does not rot. It will never let mold take hold inside it. No insect eats through it. No termite, no wood-boring beetle of any kind. And the fact most people miss entirely is what happens to it with age. The longer this material stands, the harder it gets. Each year measurably denser than the year before. Over decades, it slowly and permanently converts into actual stone. Walls built from it hundreds of years back are standing today. Not restored, not rebuilt. Standing exactly as first constructed. 3 men in 1937 decided that had to be stopped. They made the core ingredient a federal crime to grow or sell. This is the story of the building material they made illegal. This story does not begin inside a laboratory or any courtroom. It begins along a slow-moving river in 6th century France. Merovingian engineers were constructing stone bridge abutments along the banks of the Seine and its tributaries. The mortar binding those foundations was mixed from 2 ingredients, hemp and lime. Simple, cheap, abundant. The bridges above them were eventually defeated by water and time, as most bridges from that era were. But the hemp-lime foundations those bridges rested on held firm, completely firm. Archaeologists recovered them in the modern century, 1,400 years underground, unmoved, uncracked, unbroken, no mold, no crumbling, no structural degradation of any kind. The material had not merely survived, it had continued hardening for 14 centuries beneath a riverbed. That is not fortune. That is a material fulfilling its purpose at a scale most modern engineers would call impossible. Move east now, to the carved Buddhist stone caves of Ajanta in the Aurangabad district of western India. These caves were chiseled from solid basalt rock beginning in the 2nd century BC. The walls inside were plastered and painted. Those paintings became some of the most studied ancient artworks on Earth. But what the art historians noted for centuries, and what the materials scientists finally confirmed, was that the plaster underneath had remained structurally intact for 15 centuries, through every monsoon season those limestone caves experienced. Researchers who tested the ancient cave plaster in 2016 found compressed hemp fiber woven into every single layer. 15 centuries of seasonal flooding. Not one visible inch of mold growth, not one section of plaster failure attributable to moisture. The builders who applied that plaster did not have laboratory data. They did not have peer-reviewed studies. They had accumulated knowledge. Generations of understanding passed forward through trade, through craft, through the slow inheritance of what works. To understand why this material behaves the way it does, you need to understand what it actually is. The formula behind hempcrete is almost insultingly straightforward. You take the woody inner core of the hemp plant. This inner core is called the hurd. For most of recorded history, rope makers and textile producers threw hurd away as completely useless waste. It was the part nobody wanted, the dry, fibrous skeleton left behind once the valuable outer fibers were stripped off the stalk. You mix hurd with lime and water, then pack that mixture into wall form set around a basic timber frame. Then you wait. What happens over the following months is not standard construction chemistry. The lime begins reacting with carbon dioxide present in the open air. Chemists call this process lime carbonation. It is slow, it is gradual, and it does not stop quickly. Over months, and in some wall compositions, over as many as 12 complete years, the lime inside those wall forms converts back to calcium carbonate, limestone essentially. The wall stops being a mixture of ingredients. It becomes a permanent mineral structure, a monolithic unit. The timber frame it surrounds becomes encased inside what is, for all material purposes, a stone wall. And here is the detail that changes everything. Every passing year leaves it measurably denser and harder than the year before. A standard wood frame home loses structural integrity each decade. Moisture cycles, thermal expansion, pest pressure, and gravity work continuously against it. Code-built American homes are engineered with a lifespan assumption of roughly 50 years. A hempcrete wall gains physical density with every decade that passes. Roman lime structures still standing across Europe are the proof. The material does not age toward failure, it ages toward permanence. Now look at what the fire data actually shows, because this is where the numbers become very difficult to argue with. When open flame contacts a hempcrete wall, the lime binder reacts immediately. It forms a self-extinguishing char layer directly on the surface of contact. That char layer cuts oxygen from the flame beneath it. The fire cannot go deeper. It has no path forward. Under ASTM E119 standardized fire resistance testing, the same protocol used on every commercial building material sold in the United States, hempcrete walls held against sustained temperatures of 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit for more than 60 continuous minutes of direct exposure. 1,700 degrees, 60 full minutes, no breach. A standard pine stud frame loses all structural integrity in under 10 minutes at those temperatures. Not slower, not partially. 10 minutes and the frame collapses. The wall falls, the structure fails. Hempcrete earned the top Class A fire rating in the American building industry on the basis of that performance. No chemical additives, no factory coatings, no flame retardant sprays applied after the fact. The material produces its own fire protection through its chemistry. In January of 2025, wildfires tore through the Los Angeles basin. Thousands of structures burned. Architects who walked the ash-covered neighborhoods afterward began recommending hempcrete for the rebuilding. Walls that do not burn, in a region that burns on a cycle that is accelerating. The irony is not subtle. The solution was available in 1937. The mold story is worse than the fire story. Mold requires a surrounding pH of 4.5 or lower to establish a colony and grow. The lime binder in hempcrete holds a stable pH level near 12 throughout the life of the wall. That pH is not mildly hostile to mold growth. It is chemically lethal to it. The wall does not resist mold. It eliminates the conditions mold needs before any growth can begin. But the more important quality, the one most builders and most building scientists miss entirely, is that hempcrete breathes. Moisture moves through a hempcrete wall rather than collecting inside it. This is called vapor permeability. The wall acts as a buffer, absorbing ambient humidity when indoor air is damp, releasing it back when conditions dry. It regulates the internal moisture environment of a home continuously and passively, with no mechanical system required. In a conventional wood-framed American home, moisture enters wall cavities through a dozen pathways. Through cracks in exterior cladding, through plumbing condensation, through the stack effect that pulls humid air upward through the building envelope. That moisture collects behind the installed dry wall. It sits in the hidden wall cavity. It feeds mold colonies for years. You cannot detect it forming. You cannot smell it until it has already spread through the structure. In a hempcrete wall, there is no cavity. No hollow space exists to trap moisture inside. The wall manages internal humidity the way old-growth timber once did in traditional construction. Absorptively, actively, continuously. This is also why a hempcrete wall must never be sealed with cement render on its exterior. Cement is vapor impermeable. It traps moisture inside the wall, stops the carbonation process, and reverses the material's single most important working property. A breathable lime plaster coat on the exterior surface protects the wall while preserving everything that makes it function. So why does almost no one living today know hempcrete exists? Why do American homes still use chemically treated pine framing and petrochemical foam insulation? Why did this knowledge have to survive in French archaeological sites and Indian cave systems rather than in American building code? In the 1930s, the American hemp industry was rising with unusual momentum. An inventor named George Schlichten had built a decorticator machine in the early 1900s, a device that processed raw hemp stalks at industrial speed, separating usable fiber from hurd at just half a cent per pound of output. The machine solved the single largest barrier to hemp becoming an economically dominant crop. It removed the labor cost that had always made hemp harder to scale than tree timber. In 1937, a new mechanical hemp harvester reached commercial production. Popular Mechanics magazine prepared a feature story. The headline called "Hemp, the Crop That Would Become America's Most Important Agricultural Resource." The story ran in February of 1938. It was too late. 3 men had already acted. William Randolph Hearst ran the most powerful newspaper chain in America. He held vast timber forests across the Pacific Northwest and paper mills throughout the continent. Those mills ran exclusively on wood pulp. Hemp produces 4 times more usable paper fiber per acre than any tree species used in commercial forestry. If hemp became the standard raw material for American paper, Hearst's timber empire did not decline. It collapsed. DuPont Chemical had patented nylon in 1935 and was building an entire portfolio of synthetic and petrochemical products designed to replace natural materials at industrial scale. Synthetic rope, synthetic fabric, synthetic insulation. Every one of those products needed an annual purchase from DuPont. Hemp grew from open ground for almost nothing. No factory required, no annual licensing fee, no corporate intermediary between the farmer and the market. Andrew Mellon was the sitting Secretary of the United States Treasury. He was also the primary private banker financing the DuPont industrial empire. In 1931, Mellon appointed his own future nephew-in-law, a man named Harry Anslinger, to lead the newly formed Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Anslinger needed a target to justify the Bureau's existence and budget. Mellon handed him one designed precisely to serve their shared financial interests. What followed was a textbook campaign of organized industrial fraud. Hearst's newspapers ran sustained editorial and news coverage equating hemp with marijuana, a slang term then almost entirely unfamiliar to American readers. The word had been imported specifically because it sounded foreign, dangerous, and unfamiliar to the farming communities that had grown hemp commercially for generations. Almost no one reading those headlines knew that marijuana referred to the same plant their grandparents had grown to supply the Continental Army. Anslinger testified before Congress, reading Hearst newspaper stories aloud into the official congressional record as if they constituted scientific or legal evidence. The stories described fabricated acts of violence, moral destruction, and racial degeneracy, all attributed to hemp use. The American Medical Association formally opposed the bill. Their opposition was ignored. Hemp industry representatives requested time to address the committee. That time was denied. The Marijuana Tax Act passed in 1937. It did not ban hemp outright. It required a federal tax stamp for any transaction involving the plant. To obtain a stamp, you had to already be in possession of a licensed hemp crop. To grow a licensed hemp crop, you needed the stamp in advance. The requirement was circular by design. The trap was deliberate. The American hemp industry collapsed within 3 years. The hurd, the building material, disappeared from American construction within a generation. In 1619, the colonial Jamestown government issued a formal decree requiring every farmer in the Virginia colony to grow hemp crops. It was not optional. It was a civic obligation, the same category as military service. The colony needed rope, sail, and mortar. Hemp provided all three. George Washington tracked his hemp cultivation across 90 diary entries. Thomas Jefferson designed a hemp processing tool with enough care that he considered it one of his more practical engineering achievements, and then deliberately refused to patent it. He wanted every American farmer to access it without cost or restriction. The entire early American Navy was built on hemp. Every sail, every rope, every caulked deck seam, the woody hurd of those stalks, the part rope makers discarded, was the raw material for hard walls and farm structures across the eastern seaboard. American builders used it without a name for it, without a theory for why it worked, simply because it worked. 3 men erased that tradition, not by winning a scientific argument, by controlling the available information until the generation that remembered was gone. The suppression was not permanent. Hemp became federally legal again in December of 2018 under the Agriculture Improvement Act, which restored the right to grow, process, and sell the plant. In 2022, the International Code Council, the body that sets standard American building codes, approved hempcrete for use under those codes. The legal path is open. Here is the core process for building with hempcrete today. Source hemp hurd from any licensed hemp processor operating in your state. Mix 3 parts hurd to 1 part lime binder and 1 part water. Pack the mixture into wall forms set around an existing timber frame structure. Remove the forms after 48 hours. The wall holds its shape. Leave the surface exposed for a minimum of 4 weeks to allow the initial carbonation phase to advance. The wall will continue hardening progressively for months beyond that point. Apply a breathable lime plaster coat to the exterior surface to protect against weathering. Never use cement render. It is vapor impermeable and will stop the wall from functioning as designed. A contractor quoting spray foam insulation for a single wall section will charge roughly $3,000 for a petrochemical product with a degradation timeline measured in decades. That same hempcrete wall section costs around $150 in materials. Not marginally cheaper, 20 times cheaper, for a wall that hardens with age rather than degrading. That wall also sequesters approximately 325 kilograms of carbon dioxide per cubic meter for the entire life of the building. The wall does not just protect the structure it forms, it actively removes carbon from the atmosphere for as long as it stands. The knowledge did not die when they passed that act in 1937. It went to France, where builders in Burgundy had never stopped using hemp lime construction. It held in the Indian cave systems where 15 centuries of monsoons never found a way through it. It built homes in Belgium and the Netherlands through the latter half of the 20th century, where it was studied, documented, and refined into the engineered material now legal under American building code. It waited. It hardened. It outlasted everything sent against it. The bridge foundations from 6th century France are still there. The cave plaster from 2nd century India is still there. The 3 men who decided this material's future was too threatening to allow are long gone. The walls they tried to stop are still standing.